Ciao everyone! In this video I will break down a mastering chain I recently did, and I want to show you all the tips and tricks I used. I will break it down step by step. So, this is the track. Let's jump to the chorus. And now I will compare them with the game match. So there isn't much difference, but the master version is a bit fuller, a bit rich, and it still retains the same punch as the original mix. And this was quite a challenge because much of it was going to be lost through all the mastering, through all the maximizers and limiters. So I left one bar of silence before the track and at the end of the track, so I can make some cuts and I can just take care of the look ahead, which might leave some spikes and some things not really good at the extremes of the track. I will fix that later in RX7. So let's start. We have this EQ8. Let me disable all the things. I have this EQ8, which is enabled at this point. And is a low pass and a shelf automating, because the whole outro wasn't perfect from the mix, so I needed to fade it out a bit more. Then we have this automation, which is this one, and simply is the mix getting a bit more towards mono, narrower in the stereo image. And then it opens back at the drop and in the chorus and so on. Then let's turn on all these things. So the very first thing apart those automations is clipping. So
casa base, casa al mare, solamente case aler. Sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di...
So it's a bit severe, a bit light, is something in the middle. I just wanted to chisel out all the peaks in the tracks because I wanted them even for compressors and saturators and so on later in the mastering chain. And so I use standard clip. In this case I turned up the gain, the input gain, and then I turned down the output gain, and I enabled the ceiling. So at 0 dB we have the clipping inside the plugin, and they are level matched. So this is the difference.
Solamente case aler, sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco. Se ti appare mentre ti spaventa, l'importante è che non suona al fresco.
The very cool thing about standard clip is that it's very transparent unless you just ride it very hard. But if you just want a couple of dB, 1, 2, 3 dBs, it's really transparent, but it makes you gain headroom. So Then we have Saturn. So this is a saturator. I've used 3 bands, okay, and I've used clean tube, and warm tape. Let's start with the clean tube.
Solamente caseale, sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente.
So now we are listening some of the rest of the mix, even if I soloed the Saturn, because the mix is at 50%. So now just let's bring it back to 100%.
Solamente caseale, sono popolare nelle.
So this is the low end with the clean tape. So it's a bit dirtier. I used the drive all the way up. I kept the dynamics at 0, and then I mixed it with the band mix, and I chose the clean tube. So my suggestion to choose the distortion algorithm is to turn the drive really high so you can hear the amount, the tone of the distortion, and then we switch between them. And most of the time everything will sound bad, but you have to keep in consideration that you will mix it with both the band mix and the global mix. So you just have to listen for the harmonics you're adding. It takes a bit of time to understand how to do it, but it's worth it. So now let's pass to the mid-range.
Solamente caseale, sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale.
I've made from 100 Hz to 3300 Hz. So
Solamente caseale, sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco. Se ti appare
So there's no much difference in the mid-range, and that's what I wanted. All I wanted from this band is that when I turn it on and off, I just feel the difference, and I feel it a bit more powerful, but I wanted to be something that if I wasn't in front of the plugin, I couldn't tell. It could have been some little Q, some little compression, saturation. I just wanted some more subtle energy. And then for the high end, so I made it dirtier, objectively dirtier, but all the dirt that you hear in solo now, it's not perceived in the whole mix. It's what it makes it feel better in the whole context. So now let's try to turn them on and off.
Solamente caseale, sono popolare.
Let's bring it back to 50%.
Solamente caseale, sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco. Se ti appare mentre ti spaventa, l'importante è che non suona al fresco. Questi rapper.
So this is the global bypass. Now.
Solamente caseale, sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona.
You can hear the hi-hats getting a bit lost without the saturation, but you don't actually perceive them as dirt or wasted.
Solamente caseale, sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti.
The mid-range is subtle.
Solamente caseale, sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie.
And the low end is a bit heavier, but it makes a lot in the economy of the whole mix. So this was it, and I mixed it at 50%. Now let's go on. We have the Fab filter Pro MB. So here I've done some things.
Casa base, casa al mare, solamente case ale. Sono popolare nelle
This is the difference.
Casa base, casa al mare, solamente case ale. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco. Se ti appare mentre ti spaventa, l'importante è che non suona al fresco.
So I used multiband compression to give more movement, more dynamics to the whole thing. So in the low end, I expanded. So let's turn off everything. Okay. Let's start with the low end. So it sounds like this.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case ale. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale.
I wanted more hit, but really short, really quick, more attack in the low end. Let's solo it. So it's just a quick hit. I used the expand, the ratio all the way up. The knee is middle and barely no look ahead. So the attack is really quick because I want the punch to start as soon as possible, and the release is quick as well. So the range is 1 dB because I didn't want to overdo it. I just wanted to keep it limited to 1 dB of expansion. And then I turn it down to this point. So basically I'm adding half dB of expansion. Then in the mid-range, we went with compression. So in the mid-range I have way more attack because I want the transients of the vocals, the kick and the snare to pass through. Casa base, casa al mare, solamente case ale. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre I used alpha dB of range and a quarter of dB of boost. The release is really quick because I want the transient to pass in the compressor, and then I want it to recover immediately. So this is a hard compression which enhances the very few peaks that pass through it. Then in the high end, I wanted some more movement, mainly given by the snare. So the whole high end is being expanded, is going to be brighter when the snare hits, which is the main element in the high end, which gives rhythm apart from the hi-hats. So now I will turn on and off each band so you will see how it sounds. Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case ale. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel. Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case ale. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale. Just can hear how with all the expansion, the mid-range without the compression feels flat and lost. Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case ale. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco. So, the purpose of this multiband is to bring everything up, make everything feel more in your face, more dynamic, more powerful. because as you could hear, without it, as I turned off the high band or the lower band, they felt like they were lower in the mix. They were just left behind. So this is the whole thing. For the high end, I used quick attack, medium to short release, 1 dB of range, and then I set up the threshold until I've got half dB of expansion. Now let's move to the first compressor. So this was set to make everything glued together. So as you can see, it's reacting to a lot of things, the voice too. And the ratio is 1.5 to 1, the style is clean, the attack is really slow, 9 milliseconds, and the release it's fairly fast. The knee was 30. And most important, I used the sidechain filter because I didn't want the kick to overpower the compression. So this whole compressor is still compressing the kick, the snare, everything in the low end as well, but it's not compressing it in response to the whole low end, but in response to anything that's above 300 Hz. So the low end is still being a bit compressed. And here I have alpha dB of compression. And the cool thing about these settings is that you hear the voice bouncing a bit more, because rap is a percussive type of singing and you want more bounce. Then, second compressor. So this is just a touch, probably it's just me. I just wanted to give a bit more of bounce, of punch after the kick. I just feel that the kick is pumping more because if we reduce the volume after the kick, the perception that we have is that kick is louder. That's it. Then I went with the exciter. So this is just some slightly more powerful high end. I will solo it. So let's save these settings. Okay. So this is what I did. This is the type of excitement I added. So this is it, and I mixed it fairly low. Then we have this other one. so a lot more dirt. And then I mixed everything at 50. I mixed everything at 50 just because I couldn't fine-tune the mix here. I just rethinked that, and this gives me the chance of going more in depth in this narrow range. So now let's set it back. Okay. And this was at 50.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case Aler, sono popolare. Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case Aler, sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale sulle scale pare.
So this is just a bit more of energy. Maybe you aren't perceiving it, but when you are working on your own stuff, you are used to the sound and you just know what you're doing to the source. Now let's go to the imager.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case Aler, sono popolare nelle popolari.
So what I did is pretty simple. I've just widened this band by 10%, 11%, and I did the same thing but more on this thing. So you can just widen these bands a bit without having to worry about monocompatibility. The high end is where you can do it without worrying about it. Now let's jump to the magic of this master. So this is what happened.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case Aler, sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra, senti Frankie suona sempre fresco, se ti appare mentre ti spaventa, l'importante è che non suona al fresco. Questi rapper sono mamma esco adesso ma non torno presto, la mia musica mi fa scuola.
Now this might sound exaggerate, and it is, but it feels like that because it's not going to be smashed by the maximizer. Maximizer will squash everything back and will reset the balance, but we have gained some punch here. So we have first animate. So this plugin is just great.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case Aler, sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra, senti Frankie suona sempre fresco, se ti appare mentre ti spaventa, l'importante è che non suona al fresco. Questi rapper sono mamma esco adesso ma non torno presto, la mia musica.
So I've just been able to recover the kick and improve it. So I used expand and I used this band. Let's solo it. So I've just isolated the knock of the kick, which is between 100, 174. And it sounds almost like a tom. And I've set it to 100%. The threshold is fairly high, 9 dB. And I've used a hard knee because I want it to trigger as soon as it goes over the threshold. It has to be really instant. Then the ratio is 1 to 150. The attack is the quickest possible, 1 millisecond, and the release, it's really fast, 50 milliseconds. So let's turn off everything.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case Aler, sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare.
You just hear that the kick is punching a lot more. So now let's go to punch, which is the second module of animate.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case Aler, sono popolare nelle popolari quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di...
So punch is a transient shaper, a dynamic transient shaper, and I wanted to use it very lightly because I did another transient shaping afterwards, and I've isolated from 88 to 185 and set the threshold to taste, and the amount is really low. So this thing right here is like the dry wet. The only thing is that it goes to 300%, and this is really a plus because if you want to keep the whole thing quick but you want it exaggerate, you can keep the threshold high and exaggerate the whole effect with this dry wet. So here's the sensitivity. So this is the effect, okay? This is the sensitivity. It's just like the ratio. It adds a bit more of release, but I wanted it be less. Then Ignite. Ignite is a Saturator distortion module.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case alert. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco, se ti appare mentre ti spaventa.
And I used it to color the kick a bit. I've used only the mid channel. I've isolated it the same way as the other modules, and I've scaled it down to 35%. These are the settings. I wanted it to be quick. So this is the whole thing. Now let's recompare it.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case alert. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco, se ti appare mentre ti...
This is it. So Transient Master by Native Instruments.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case alert. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco, se ti appare mentre ti spaventa.
So now this might look like a bad choice, but I actually added this after all the mastering process. I just wanted to recover some more punch while listening through all the limiters, and I exaggerated this transient master, which is at 50%, which is quite a lot. Usually from 10 to 20 is already a good range. And I didn't want neither smooth, neither limit, because I wanted it to actually add more gain and not just more transient but limited. I wanted it to hit more the other effects. And then animate on the snare. So this is the Ignite.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case alert. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco.
Just wanted more hit from the snare. So I isolated from 579 and 3050. Then another animate.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case alert. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco, se ti appare mentre ti spaventa.
So I've used the expansion on the snare and the punch on the snare. I could have made everything in one animate for the snare, but the thing is that the snare initially wasn't cutting really high, So I've boosted first with the first animate, and then I was able to treat it with the expansion and with the punch afterwards. And then another standard clip.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case alert. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco. Se ti appare mentre ti
So this is just containing all the peaks. So basically I didn't do anything apart from a slight boost, 15% of the soft clip saturator. So I've just added a bit more overall volume while cutting all the peaks. And then finally we have the mastering chain. Now I will compare it with and without the previous module.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case alert. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco. Se ti appare mentre ti spaventa, l'importante è che non suona al fresco. Questi rapper sono
So the whole maximizing and limiting killed the drums, and I had to recover them. So this is the reason why I had to exaggerate all the thing in that module with the animate, transient, standard clip, and so on. And also this has been made in order to control the response of the whole maximizers to the kick and the snare, which are the highest peaks. So now let's see how I set up all these maximizers. So this one is IRC1 -2 -2, and it's set at 2, which is the default, and I feel like it's just help with not killing much the transient and not killing much the whole sustain of the track.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case alert. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco.
Then a second one, which is identical in practice. What I did is 1 dB of gain reduction, because the first one was hitting at maximum 2 dBs. So here I had to go lower, so 3 dBs.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case alert. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco. Se ti appare mentre ti...
Then same thing here with 4 and a bit faster character. Then at 5 with at 1, and then the final limiter. So the final limiter has 1 dB, because here it's at +6. The previous one was at -5, so it's +1. And it's transparent, no look ahead in this case, and quick attack, because I didn't want to add even more punch while leaving the attack high, and the release is quick. And I have draw peak limiting.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case alert. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale pare. Niente pare più di quel che sembra. Senti Frankie suona sempre fresco. Se ti appare
So I have 1 to 2 dBs of gain reduction here.
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case alert. Sono popolare nelle popolari.
So here we hear the whole difference in volume, because I had to bring up the whole thing. So
Niente casa base, casa al mare, solamente case alert. Sono popolare nelle popolari, quando il sole sale sulle scale.
then how do I check if I did a good work? By gain matching everything. So I turn this off, let's gain match the chorus, which is the loudest section of the whole track.
Ce l'ho spesso ma non mi risponde. Vuoi fare criminale, vendi la bamba. Qui la pula non mi cerca manco il caramba. Siamo pazzi nei locali tipo in curva samba. Quando senti refrain chi balli la samba. Vuoi fare criminale, vendi la bamba. Qui la...
So what I did is checking the integrated loudness, which is minus 14.6, unmastered. Now let's play the master with the whole chain.
Fare criminale, vendi la bamba. Qui la pula non mi cerca manco il caramba. Siamo pazzi nei locali tipo in curva samba. Quando senti refrain chi balli la samba. Vuoi fare criminale, vendi la...
So minus 6.9. So the difference is roughly minus 7.6. Because I had to keep in consideration also the rest of the track, which was at minus 15. So this is a fair comparison.
Fare criminale, vendi la bamba. Qui la pula non mi cerca manco il caramba. Siamo pazzi nei locali tipo in curva samba. Quando senti refrain chi balli la samba. Vuoi fare criminale, vendi la bamba. Qui la pula non mi cerca manco il caramba.
So this is the difference, the actual difference in this mastering chain, which isn't a lot, but it required a lot of work. And this is it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. If you have any question about any trick I didn't cover as you expected, if you didn't understand anything, if you want to know more things about one of the plugins, feel free to leave a comment in the section below. So see you in the next video.